Hey there, everybody. I am joined by Andy Talaga, and we have
Hello.
something a little bit different. So we have a Lord of the Rings TCG deck guide here for a Fellowship of the Ring, sort of a Gandalf, Hobbit, Swarm, aggro deck. So we thought it'd be fun to do something a little bit different, a little bit different of a game. So Andy, you want to walk us through what we're looking at here?
Yeah, this is funny. My experience with Lord of the Rings started and ended with Fellowship Block. Once we moved past Realms of the Elf Lords, I never played the game again. So I don't know anything that happened from Two Towers on. But basically, this is an aggro deck. It's probably not as optimized as it could be. I'm sure there's somebody who's like plays Fellowship Block all the time, watches this, and is like, "Oh, you play that card? Why would you play that? That's a terrible card." Okay, I got it. But so I put this together because I thought it'd be, kind of fun to run through and kind of give some thoughts on Lord of the Rings. So I guess really to start, this is going to be a very aggressive deck. Um, the idea is you're going to try to leave your opponent behind you. So we're going to start with Frodo from Mines of Moria, mostly because of the game text of artifacts, possessions, and Hobbit Tales played on Frodo are -1. You actually only have two. You have O Elbereth Gilthoniel and you have Sting. So both of those cost -1, which means that in total, all of the cards that if you played every single card, obviously, Gandalfs are getting pitched to heal Gandalf, same with Barliman Butterbur, but all of your Fellowship cards come out to 19 total Twilight that you will play for the entire game. Start the rare ring just mostly for the boost in whatever it's called, vitality or something. And then you start this Gandalf, the Grey Pilgrim. And so at the start of each of your turns, you draw a card. As with most games, especially Decipher games, I guess maybe not Star Trek, but most games, the whole game really boils down to resource management. And so you're trying to do resource management by choking your opponent on their Twilight pool. You're also trying to do a resource management of the number of cards that you see versus what your opponent sees in a game. Ideally, you should go through every single card of your deck with this deck by the time you reach Site 9. You should see every single card at some point. And then there's kind of like you could say like a temporal advantage, where you're going to double move every single turn of this game because you have to get from 1 to 9. So no skirmishes ever happen at 1. So really you only have 8 sites. So this game should last 4 turns and that's it. And ideally you're not going to put out you're going to put out very minimal amounts of Twilight. And you're going to cycle through everything. So you're really trying to essentially at some point time walk your opponent with this deck. So you're going to start Gandalf. He's going to draw you a card. So you have 59 cards left in your deck. After you start, you draw your 8. You'll draw another card. You bid 0. You want to go second with this deck. Actually, it doesn't even really matter. You probably just bid 0 and go second because who cares? And then your first turn, you probably just don't play anything. Maybe you play O Elbereth, Gilthoniel, or Sting, or Barliman Butterbur because they're free. You don't really need Glamdring or Gandalf's staff at this point. And you move. So we're going to start with Hobbiton Woods. You can exert a Hobbit to player Site 2 if necessary. There's really not any good Site 2s. I mean, the best Site 2 I think is banned, which was Etten Moors, where you could like exert a companion or you could exert a minion to make them strength +2. But for some reason that card's banned. So honestly, I didn't really care. I just chose something with a low Twilight cost. So you could just exert Frodo, go to Buckleberry Ferry. None of the Site 2 game texts are any good. So like I said, it doesn't matter. You didn't play anything. You give them 3 Twilight, 1 for the site, 1 for Frodo, 1 for Gandalf. They're probably not going to do anything. So then you can move to Council Courtyard. You give them 2 more Twilight, 1 for Gandalf, 1 for Frodo. They have 5. Maybe they play something. You put Gandalf in front of them. He takes a wound, whatever, right? You get to site 3. On your turn, you heal Frodo, and you'll heal Gandalf because you're at a, whatever these call it, sanctuary. So exerting to get Buckleberry Ferry, and then whatever 1 point of damage they did to Gandalf is like all erased. So you move to, I mean, they might not have Council Courtyard, right? I felt like Council Courtyard was probably the most common site 3, other than Fort of Brunnen, which allowed your Nazgul to play for like -5, but usually it was like one of those 2. But Council Courtyard, if you move from there, you can remove 2, which is why you want to go second, because if you're going second, then they're going to move first. So ideally, they moved to your site 3. So now on your site 3, you can play things basically that, you know, would cost up to 2. So again, whether you have Sting or O Elbereth, here's where you can play Gandalf's Staff or Glamdring because you're going to remove 2 when you move. If they moved first, they went to Mithril Mine. So you're going to be giving them like 5 Twilight, which is again like 1 guy probably. So, you know, you probably want Gandalf's Staff here more than anything. If they do attack you at any of these sites, you have Hobbit Stealths at sites 1 to 5, cancel a skirmish involving a Hobbit. And then there's 3 copies of Hobbit Intuition at sites 1 to 4, cancel a skirmish. So you can just assign whoever they play to Frodo and then run away. And then you move again to the bridge. So you get 6, 7, 8. You know, maybe they have 1 guy out. You know, use your Hobbit Intuition at site 4, Hobbit Stealth at site 5. If they do attack, you have Gandalf. You can place Servant at Secret Fire, make them -3, which is the equivalent of giving your guy power +6 to try and overwhelm him. Right, so they have to get 21 power to overwhelm Gandalf if you play Servant at Secret Fire. So it's like, okay, that's probably not happening. So Gandalf takes a wound, and then, you know, the turn ends. Turn 6, you move to Valley of the Silverlode. So when the Fellowship moves from there, each Hobbit companion can heal. And again, you're really just, at this point, maybe you play Pippin, maybe you play Sam or Thrarin. These guys are basically in there so that on site 9, you can either just let Frodo die or you just let all your guys die. But yeah, you're basically just putting out as minimum amount of Twilight from moving and playing things, and then just either running away from battles with Hobbit Stealths and Hobbit Intuitions, or minusing out, you know, or taking like 1 point of damage each turn, and then using like Barliman to go get your Servant and Secret Fires back. You can pitch extra copies of Barliman and Gandalf to heal them, so that you can go get more copies of Servant of the Secret Fire. The only card that basically seems out of place is 1 copy of Sleep Caradhras, just because there's like randomly like all these like crazy minion conditions all over the place sometimes. So just like 1 failsafe to get rid of all of them. But ultimately, you're going to cycle through your whole deck so that on site 9, you just always save your power according to his statures. And then on site 9, just let everybody get assigned to Frodo and then play 4 copies of power according to his stature. You add 4 burdens. You're not going to get corrupted because you're not taking any other burdens anywhere else. And then he puts 4 wounds on all minions skirmishing him, which maybe the Balrog's the only thing that has 5 vitality, I think. So 4 power according to his stature will just kill everything. And then once everything's killed, it's like, okay, won. On the minion side, you're not trying to really kill your opponent. You want to, at one site, basically force your opponent to stop so that you can jump ahead of them by one site. And that's really it. To do that, probably the best overall minion card, at least through Fellowship, in my experience, was Goblin Runner, because he's a net positive on resources, and the game is pretty much just all resource management. That's all it is. So anything that's a net positive on resources is really good. So you Goblin Runner, and then you have a host of 1,000 to go get more Goblin Runners back, so that you can like go get whatever the guy is. This guy, when you play this minion, you can play a weapon from your discard pile, which gets you Goblin Scimitars, so you can draw a card. There's a Goblin Axe as a fail safe, as like an extra one, because you also have Goblin Armories to make these things like you'll generate a Twilight off of Goblin Scimitars because they cost free, but when you play an Orc weapon, you add one. So it's just another way to just continuously pump out as much possible Twilight as you can, and then either play, a Troll's Keyword and a Troll to hopefully just like stop them for a turn from double moving, or you can like play all this stuff and then follow up with, one of your 2 non-goblins on Kea, so that you can, wound a companion and try and force them to stop, and then they have to fight a double fierce 11 power Nazgul or Tower Assassin to go kill all the like stupid elves like Elrond and Galadriel and Selborn and whatever the other elves are that shoot goblins. You can just play them and just kill some of those guys. And then Moria Scout, there's elves everywhere. I mean, Legolas is probably like the single best card, I guess. Maybe Double Shot, I can't remember. One of those two was like probably like the best card overall in Fellowship block. So there's always elves. So this guy's also free. He also has an extra vitality, so you can, save him with a Goblin Armory or, whatever you need to do. He can take a wound and then stick around to try and just stop your opponent. All you want to do is stop them once, because on the free people side, you're just going to blow past them because you're generating so much Twilight off of your goblins, drawing so many cards. Like, you essentially 8 turns of the game. Even though you're double moving, you can, whatever it is, during regroup, pitch a card to draw a card, but you get your turn and your opponent's turn. So if you wanted to go through all 59 cards of your deck over 4 turns, you'd have to play about, what is that, like 6, not quite 16, like 14 cards a turn, which means you have to play every card in your hand on each turn, which you're quite capable of doing, and just drawing through everything, which is why when you do get to Site 9, you should have 4 copies. I clicked one of these, but you should have 4 copies of Power according to a Stature. And you're at Site 9, it's like, I don't care, Thrarin can die. Your 1x random Pippin who removes a burden, in case that is a real thing, dies. Gandalf can die. If you really needed to, Frodo could die, and you can just pass the ring to Sam, or you could just let Sam die. It's like, okay, great. Your Hobbit Stealths, Hobbit Intuitions can buff your Hobbits. So, I mean, you're just play every single card of your deck. I feel like with most games, if you can out-resource your opponent in, like, resources to play things, Twilight Pool, and or choke your opponent from those resources, which this deck does both of, as well as have a temporal advantage, being able to time walk your opponent at some point, as well as being able to have a card draw advantage where you're going to play every single card of your deck, you should be able to win. If you have every card in your deck and you can't win a game, you probably shouldn't play that deck. So that said, since you're going to play every single card out of your deck with this and see all of them, I think you have a pretty good shot of getting there. So that's my take on Lord of the Rings.
No, this was a lot of fun, Andy. And the thing I think about this deck as well, this isn't that complicated of a deck to run. I think it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if I'd recommend it for a brand new player, but I think, if you have 10 games under your belt, like I think you could probably figure this deck out. Right? It's not overly complicated. It's pretty straightforward. So I might go tinker around with this myself. I haven't played Lord of the Rings in a minute. I've gotten more into the collector side of things, and I want to get more into the playing side. So thanks so much for sharing this. We'll have the deck list in the description once again. Any final thoughts?
There's a couple different ways that you can build it. Hobbits have a lot of neat cards. There's that you could like swap in. Like if you didn't really want to play the Gandalf part of this, which you don't really need to, it's just that Gandalf lets you draw a card every turn. He's a good body to fight, and then Servant of the Secret Fire is one of the better interrupts or spells or whatever it's called in this game. You could turn this into just hobbits, because then you can play a talent for not being seen, which makes the shadow number -2 if you have 4 hobbits out. And then there's the other, I forget what the name of the card is, but it's like during the regroup phase, you can play it, and then the shadow sight for the next sight is -2. So between the two of those cards, you can like make the double jump part a -4, or technically -6 because you moved the first time and then you move again. So like you can choke out like 6 Twilight from that. And then you can also play the card a Promise, which is I forget what they're called, condition effect, it's like a permanent that you put out. And while you have Frodo and Sam, they're each like power +1, which makes them better to fight with. And then it's harder. And you put in like 1 copy of like Bounder, so that Hobbit has to be tripled to be overwhelmed or something like that. And that deck just runs as fast as it can. Like if you could move 4 sites a turn, you would move 4 sites a turn and game in 2 turns. But you can't do that with this deck. So there is a version where it's just hobbits, but I like Gandalf as a character, so I wanted to build a Gandalf deck, and I like this Gandalf because he draws a card, and drawing a card is very powerful in pretty much every single game. So
absolutely.
Those are my closing thoughts.
Cool. Well, Andy, thanks so much for sharing it. We might do more of this. I do have some other Lord of the Rings sort of meta content coming out as well. So stay tuned for more of that. Do want to do more of Lord of the Rings stuff in the new year. So thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Thank you.